I think we're going to do a couple of weeks on this. We'll see. It might even do more than two. So, as I was looking through, I was just looking for images that would represent some of the conditioning or some of the meanings that food has for us and how highly associated we are. If you look at Google Images, there's thousands of images around this, from grandma with holding out the cookie sheet to just all kinds of symbolism around love and food. So I think we could probably all agree that food has a lot of tentacles into different areas of our life. Certainly, there's our physical health, our physical body. There's relationships that revolve around food. Every holiday and every culture generally revolves around food. Sometimes it's fasting, more often it's feasting at the end of the fasting. And then individually as well, we have associations with food as children and certain people. Like, one of the things that I always tried to do with my grandchildren was not to be the grandma who's always giving them sugar. And I knew I was kind of successful when my granddaughter, who was 4, was staying with me, and she was talking with her mom and dad on the phone, and she says, "I don't think they sell ice cream here. Nana doesn't have it." And it was just, there's so much association of food is a source of love that I didn't want to have that be our main association. But it's hard. It's hard to do that because it works. It works with grandchildren just as much as it works with dogs when we're training dogs. So one of the things that we really know is that food is a survival level threat and a need, and so it's very important to us that we get enough food. As a baby, if we're being really nurtured, a lot of times now people are doing the skin contact when they nurse a baby or feed their babies. You just have the babies just in a diaper and then they're on your bare skin. And it can be mother, father, sibling, somebody else. But just so that there's so many benefits to having that skin to skin contact and cuddling, and the associations that we have there are positive associations. We associate comfort and love with eating, and that it's very clear that not everybody has that experience. And what we know about attachment, secure attachment, disorganized attachment, a lot of that has to do with these really early times with food. So I wanted to pause here for a little bit and do a little bit of inquiry around this. So, what do you remember? Let's start with holiday dinners. What do you remember about family holiday dinners? And so, there's a whole set of circumstances. If you had family that lived in the same location, maybe they just came over for the dinner. Oftentimes, in my family, we were going to a grandparent's, we were traveling somewhere. So, there was a few nights at least of staying there. There's usually special food, and depending on the culture that you're in, the food is different. And we get very associated with that food. The first time I had Christmas without carrot pudding, which was what our family Christmas tradition was, it was a prairie thing where the only thing they had it by Christmas was potatoes and carrots and some cinnamon and a bit of brown sugar for a sauce. So if we have those associations, it's not going to feel the same. So let's take a moment to really kind of remember back. And maybe it was a favorite holiday. Maybe it's a summer holiday where there was barbecues and you were at the beach, or maybe it was Thanksgiving or Christmas or any one of the other holidays that people celebrate with food. Who was there? And what was the general experience? Was it a good experience? Were you happy mostly? Was there a lot of anxiety, resentment maybe of all of the extra work and people? And you could think about that at different ages. Start from some time in your childhood, though, whatever age comes to mind. And notice how you feel in your body. In this next slide about family holiday dinners might have been more like what your experience was. There was fights between some of the adults. Sometimes that was really fueled by drinking. Maybe that was more in line with your experience. And stay really regulated in your nervous system. Notice your feet on the floor. Notice your breath. And if you need to stop doing this, or if you need to open your eyes, put the images on the other side of the room, do that too. And then notice what happens at a later age. So maybe in your 20s or 30s, or if you're older, maybe in your 40s or 50s. What do you remember about holiday dinners from those eras? Positive and negative. Did you decide that you were going to have a completely different type of holiday celebrations? Did you really try to recreate what you had as a child? What's your experience as an adult? Let's take a few minutes for that. And you could expand that to include birthdays, birthday cakes, cookies, sweets. What are some of the other associations with food? And really to keep track of what's going on in our body. What's going on in your body as you're looking at this? Use your breath to stay grounded and steady. And if you wanted to take a moment to jot anything down or to just mentally make a note. And then let's kind of wipe that slate clean and we'll cleanse the palate, I think is the term between courses. If you were eating a fancy meal, let that inquiry come to a bit of a rest. And notice, what was it that you believed? Were there core deficiency beliefs in particular? What were your beliefs that formed based on your experiences? some of the beliefs might be things like there's not enough food, or every time we get together, there's fighting, or they're always telling me what I can and can't eat, or there could be all kinds of different things. But notice, what are your overriding beliefs based on those experiences? And then I wanted to get into just a little bit about secret eating, eating rituals, and binge eating. So, this gets partly to the control around food. One of the reasons that people hide food or hoard food is that there has been control over it when they were children. Often it's a way to make ourselves feel better. There could be a physical, I'm not getting enough to eat, and in order to get something to eat, I need to use whatever money I have to buy junk food and hide it in my room, or I need to steal it out of the fridge or steal money for it and go buy it. Or as an adult, we're more likely to be like what this guy here is, just sitting in front of the fridge, not being shamed by anybody for it. But oftentimes, when we're eating kind of dysfunctionally, we're doing it in secret and we have rituals around it. It's very uncommon. And I don't know of anybody who would be binge eating, for instance, and sitting with complete awareness, aware of their breath, aware of their body, aware of the eating. It's much more often that we hide that. Sometimes we'll have a binge eating buddy, and maybe two or three people or members in a family will binge eat together. But oftentimes this is something that's secret, and that really causes a lot of shame. So let's take a moment to just notice what your response is to these pictures and to these words. What is your experience with hiding food or eating too much of a certain kind of food? And maybe the shame that might be coming up around that too. And shame can be such a destabilizing experience, but it also really shuts us down. So, as much as you can, to really remain aware of your body and your breath. And shaming is something that's happened by other people, it's happened within our own self. And to see if you could let that go for now, just to notice, what's your experience with this kind of eating? And maybe you don't have any experience with it, and that's great too. But if you do, whether it was as a child or as an adult, just to notice now. Let's take a couple of minutes for that. And one thing that we could notice is that, or more than notice, to really acknowledge, is that if there was no shaming, there would be no hiding. So, especially if that was happening to us as a child, being shamed is such a powerful experience, but it's powerful as an adult too. And it doesn't happen as often if the weight doesn't show on our body, but if it does, then that makes it even harder. We have that feeling of disgust for people who are out of control, and a lot of ideas about those kinds of people. The way that that happens in our culture and our society, we're going to look at a little bit more next week. But just to notice, if you're feeling any kind of shame about this, which would be almost I think this almost goes together when we're talking about secret eating or eating rituals that help us to calm down. Like if you always pair movies and popcorn, or if you're always sneaking to the fridge for that last piece of cake or something, or whatever it might be, just notice that there's shame is part of this experience. And could you just right now for a minute just to be kinder to yourself and have some compassion for this habit, this process, this mechanism of trying to make yourself feel better, trying to comfort ourselves, and that this is very, very common. We're not the only ones, whether we're on a scale of it's pretty minimal impact or it's a big impact on our lives. This is very, very common. A lot of it has to do with our survival mechanisms. And could we just for a minute let go of or see and possibly let go of some of the shame by bringing in some compassion for ourselves? Then a couple of deep breaths. So we're going to work with the inquiry. This we showed last week. One of the ways that we can work with this, and it's probably not going to work for everybody. I find it a very helpful way to kind of conceptualize it is to imagine all your conditioning is over on your left side. So just to the left of the body, outside of your body, but on the left side. And you might have a structure there, or they might be just kind of this murky cloud of goo or something. And then over on the right side, there's freedom. And so as we're doing the inquiry, we are in the middle. What are the beliefs? How are we going to work with the inquiry on this? So, some of the conditioned beliefs that we have around food, and here's just two, but take a moment to think back to what came up when you were just doing the prior inquiry. So, one of the beliefs is when people feed me, they love me. So, there's that connection between food and love. And I'll never have enough. I'll never have enough food. I'll never have enough love. And take a moment, if you have a paper and pen, you could jot down some of the beliefs, your conditioned beliefs. And let's take a moment to really bring those to mind. What are some of the conditioned beliefs that you have that are based on your experience? Because conditioning is based on our experience. What are some of those beliefs? And let them all be resident over on the left side, the space on the left side of your body. Let them all kind of sit over there, collect over there. And on the right side, that empty space on the right side of our body, there's no rules. It might be that we eat to nourish our body, we eat with pleasure, which when there's a lot of shame, we often lose the pleasure in food. And that there's no shame around food. I'm free of my conditioning and my conditioned beliefs. So, what is it that can get you from all that murky shame and conditioned beliefs around food on the left to the freedom on the right? And so I've just chosen one, I don't need food to know love, as an inquiry, a reverse inquiry. But take a moment to really think in and feel into what that might be for you. We're going to take 3 or 4 minutes here, so there'll be a little bit of time to look into this. What would your reverse inquiry be based on your conditioned beliefs. I'm not ashamed of my eating. I love myself just as I am. Stay really present in your body and your breath. And anytime you want, if it's too intense, just open your eyes, take a look at the slide, look around the room. There's lots of ways to take the pressure off a bit. And if you can, really stay with it. What's the reverse inquiry? And then what's the response to that? What are the words? How do you know that that's not true for you? I feel no shame about my eating. What happens? Thoughts, sensation. And imagine that you're free. Over on the right side, there's no rules, there's no shame. There's healthy relationship with food and eating. What do you need to let go of for that to be the case? Maybe visualize that. I'm really on my own side. There's no shame. I eat healthy foods in the right amount to really nourish my body. So notice what would that be like and let yourself feel into that for a moment. If there's anything from that mess of conditioned beliefs on the left, notice if there's something holding you into that. If there is, maybe you could do some tapping on that, bring it up into the tapping zone, your forehead. Really look at the belief and then tune into the sound of the tapping, the sensation. Take a few breaths. What do you need to let go of to live in that freedom? We're going to take another minute or two for this. So, just to start to wrap it up, maybe in a sense of really noticing what are the beliefs over there and what does that feel like energetically? And could you actually leave those behind? Notice over on the right the freedom there. And then let that resolve. There might be a number of things that you've discovered that you wanted to look into more, to do more inquiry on. And let's finish again this week with this unconditional acceptance. So, if you wanted to put your hand on your heart, and I don't think we can really acknowledge this seriously enough. Like everyone else, I was conditioned as a child, and it still affects me now as an adult. So, really let that sink in. We're not responsible for the conditioning that we had when we were a child. We can see it, and we can sometimes see how sticky it is. We can have a lot of willingness to let it go. And it's conditioned. We have responses just like a puppy that we're training. And this willingness that we might have now to really see ourselves clearly, to not deny the conditioning, not to deny our behavior, our habits, our ways that we operate around food that might not be very healthy, and to see that with kindness and patience, as well as really understanding how we got to where we are. Take a moment to really feel that in your heart. No matter what anybody else thinks or does, we could let go of shame and be kind with ourselves. And maybe it's I'm willing to work towards that. Maybe it's more aspirational. Or maybe it's really your felt experience now. It is mine. I don't shame myself. I'm willing to really see the patterns for what they are, to see my conditioning, and to be kind and patient and compassionate with myself. Let yourself really feel that. And then when you're ready, open your eyes.